Thank you. Thank you very much. I recognize that you've been sitting for 2 hours, 3 hours, something like that, but thank you very much. Thank you, Chris and Derek, for the kind introduction. Thank you, Justice Altman. Just inspiring and powerful. Just very, very impacted by your remarks. To my partner, Peter Hecht, if it weren't for you, we wouldn't be here. Thank you for everything that you've done to get us to this point. Please. The mission of this organization to defend moral clarity in public life has never felt more necessary than it does now. It's not lost on me that we are here a week before Martin Luther King Day at the Yale Club, a place long associated with the shaping of our country's civic priorities and the Kings themselves. Dr. King was awarded an honorary Doctor of Laws by Yale in 1964. During his acceptance speech, he warned that the greatest danger to a just society was not the open hatred of extremists, but the silence of good people. He spoke about the temptation of moderation, about the ease of looking away, and how injustice does not require cruelty to thrive, just casual acquiescence. Dr. King understood that moral failure can often wrap itself in the language of virtue. It feels important to say that here today because the predominant theme I want to speak about during this brief moment, the collapse of moral clarity, is not new. What's new is how mainstream it has become. When I was growing up, before the news media split into ideological camps and social media flattened every voice into the same volume, there were authoritative public figures who helped shape the moral vocabulary of the country. Not just outsized voices like Dr. King, but figures like Daniel Patrick Moynihan on the left and Jeane Kirkpatrick on the right, who believed that public life required moral seriousness, that truth was not a matter of convenience, and that right and wrong were not negotiable. Beyond our borders, voices like Alexander Solzhenitsyn, Andrei Sakharov, Lech Walesa, Natan Sharansky demonstrated what moral courage actually cost. They understood that telling the truth is rarely rewarded in the moment, and that the refusal to speak clearly is how free societies decay from the inside. Thinkers like Elie Wiesel forced us to confront uncomfortable realities about human responsibility, narcissism, and moral drift. They anchored us. They insisted that disagreement or complexity should not come at the cost of moral confusion. Yet today, in a world where everyone has a platform, whether it's X or TikTok or Facebook, no one has an outsized voice of moral authority. We have commentary without conscience, outrage without empathy. Every issue has become a referendum of partisan identity. And in that noise, something essential has been lost: the ability to say, without apology or debate, this is wrong. This organization was born in the shadow of October 7th, not as a political reaction, but as a moral one, because October 7th didn't just reacquaint us with the brutality of terrorism. It exposed something far more unsettling and broken in our community and within ourselves. In the days that followed, New York City, our city, a city that prides itself on empathy and human rights, witnessed something grotesque and beyond my own human comprehension: the systematic tearing down of posters bearing the faces of hostages. People who look like us. People who look like our sons and daughters. People who look like our grandparents. The flyers made no claims about borders or history. They simply said, these human beings were taken. They are missing. They are suffering. To tear down a hostage poster is to say that even the most basic human appeal, this person is being held against their will, is conditional. It is to declare that empathy itself is optional, that some victims are too inconvenient to be acknowledged, that certain forms of suffering do not qualify for compassion, that some grief is illegitimate, that some lives should exist outside the circle of moral concern. In the aftermath of reports of rape on October 7th, rape and murder, and rape and other unspeakable acts of sexual desecration, we did not see a universal moral response. We saw hesitation, qualification. We saw people suddenly discover an appetite for skepticism. No, this is wrong, but we need more context. No, this demands condemnation, but we must be careful. As Martin Luther King insisted at Yale, human dignity is never contextual. It does not depend on one's politics. It does not depend on which side of history one claims to be on. It does not depend on ethnicity. When a community can rationalize the tearing down of hostage posters, it has abandoned the idea that human suffering is universal. When it can explain away rape committed against Jews as somehow complicated, it has already decided that moral absolutes are optional. So when I speak about my own quiet realization that people around us may not see us, I'm not speaking abstractly. I'm speaking about our own community, where empathy has become conditional, where moral clarity now requires ideological alignment, and where Jewish humanity must be argued for rather than assumed. In the wake of the recent election in New York City, the dominant feeling I experienced, and I'm speaking purely personally and apolitically, was not surprise. It wasn't shock. I was expecting it. It was just this dull, continuing realization that many people who I believe shared my own personal convictions, everyday people who I pass on 6th Avenue, the people in my office building, people who are my college and law school friends, may not. That there are people who speak and post fluently about tolerance and kindness and then make choices that, at least in part, normalize prejudice against Jews. It tells you that anti-Jewish bigotry doesn't always announce itself with torches and Cossacks riding into our public squares. Sometimes it wears the language of empathy. Sometimes it calls itself justice. Sometimes it hides behind complexity and performative posts on Facebook or in art. Thousands of people went to the polls and made their own personal decision that the Jewish sense of belonging and safety in this city, the city with the largest Jewish community in America, was at least in part negotiable. That prejudice, when properly packaged, could be overlooked, could be smoothed over with ambiguous, clever words, and as a result of that ambiguity, could garner the endorsement of state and national politicians. One of the first acts taken by the new administration on Inauguration Day was not to strengthen protections for Jewish life, but to strip some of them away, rescinding executive orders that prohibited the singling out of the Jewish state for boycott, and rejecting a definition of anti-Semitism precisely because it insists that some forms of hostility towards Jews are not accidental, but patterned and persistent. These are not symbolic gestures. They are governing choices, and they send a message taking us from the ambiguous to the operational. That Jewish safety and Jewish legitimacy are not principles to be defended, but variables to be debated. This is how prejudice moves from words to power, not announced, not shouted, but normalized. On the right, different language, same disease. A willingness to tolerate anti-Semitism so long as it arrives wearing the right costume. Jewish conspiracists are being platformed and normalized through mainstream interviews. Some conservative commentators are treating anti-Semitic bigots as edgy contrarians rather than moral pariahs. It's happening quietly, elegantly, almost politely in other cultural spaces we once trusted. Jews had good cause to believe that the cultural and educational institutions we helped build and sustain, publishers, art houses, independent film studios, universities, were places of integrity and complexity, places where bigotry of any kind would be recognized as an aberration of the artistic and intellectual spirit. But this season, the 2025 National Book Award for Nonfiction went to a work one day everyone will have always been against this, whose narrative treats Jewish suspicion as a sign of enlightenment. The fiction award went to a novel, The True Story of Raja the Gullible and His Mother, which collapsed Jewish identity into inherited guilt. The National Book Foundation recently gave a Lifetime Achievement Award to the publisher of The Jewish Onslaught, a polemic arguing that Jews are a coercive, manipulative, and destabilizing force in democratic society. In today's cultural hierarchy, anti-Jewishness has become an acceptable background condition of cultural life. In a recent survey of 90 elite educational institutions, including Yale, 39% of Jewish students responded that they hide their Jewish identities on campus. 58% said their school failed to protect them from anti-Jewish bias. 2 months ago, a Holocaust survivor was denied the opportunity to speak at a Brooklyn elementary school, not because the Holocaust isn't still relevant, but because it complicates a preferred narrative. 2 months ago in New York City, protesters targeted the Park East Synagogue. Last week, it was Young Israel of Kew Garden Hills. The mayor described the use of globalize the Intifada and exhortations in support of Hamas, but failed to call out the intimidation of congregants at Jewish houses of worship. Words are violence unless directed at Jews. In Los Angeles, the day of our last JINLAW meeting in the city, members of the Wilshire Boulevard Temple faced similar hostility and chants. Slovenia, Spain, Ireland, Iceland, and the Netherlands are refusing to participate in Eurovision because a Jewish Israeli contestant will participate, turning a cultural event into an instrument of exclusion. And then there is the point where words finish their work and blood begins. The massacre at Bondi Beach was not an aberration. It was the logical endpoint of a moral process we've been watching unfold in slow motion. Jews gathered publicly to celebrate life on the first night of Hanukkah and were murdered not because of anything they had done, but because of what they represented to two individuals who no longer saw them as people. On the second and fourth nights of Hanukkah, Jews were attacked in New York City, one stabbed in the chest by a man screaming that he wanted Jewish blood. Yuval Harari has warned that the great moral danger of our time is not hatred alone, but abstraction, the moment when human beings are no longer encountered as individuals with names, families, and inner lives, but as symbols, avatars, or as stand-ins for an idea. Once that happens, the moral brakes fail. Bondi Beach is what it looks like when that failure is complete. When Jews are no longer neighbors or citizens or fellow human beings, but merely embodiments of a grievance. At that point, violence no longer feels transgressive, it feels justified. This is why words matter. This is why posters matter. This is why silence matters, because the distance between erasure and murder is shorter than we want to believe. We're fast losing our communal ability to see other human beings as fully human, whether Jews, undocumented immigrants, Palestinian civilians. Once they are reduced to what they represent, rather than who they are, moral restraints collapse. Again, as we talked before, just this past weekend, the largest synagogue in Mississippi was burned to the ground. A grim echo from another place, another horrific time, on another continent. For Jews, these are not isolated incidents. They are signals that the space Jews once occupied safely in civic and cultural life is contracting. We are watching political institutions fail. We are watching neighbors stay silent. We are watching Jewish children, my own kids, feel like they have to hide their identities because the ground no longer feels secure beneath their feet. We are watching the circle tighten, not just politically, not just culturally, but morally. Dr. King understood that injustice thrives when decent people wait for someone else to do something. But he rejected patience as a virtue. He rejected the "who else am I going to vote for?" And he demanded that people stop observing and start shaping what is around them. That demand applies here, and it's the fundamental principle of our work at JINLAW. We've learned as a broader community that neither those in the state capitals or Washington are going to combat the civic decay we're experiencing. It's going to have to happen locally through deliberate action by people like us, people who decide that just watching and voting is no longer enough. If the outsized voice of moral clarity has vanished from the public square, then we must become moral actors ourselves. If our political institutions and politicians feel compelled to avoid moral clarity because they don't want to lose votes, because they view their own ascension to power to be a greater good, then we must build alternatives ourselves. I often say our first mission at JINLAW is to build community, to speak, to confront. I'm just extremely gratified to look around this room and see all of you here. To those who are already members, thank you. To those who would join us, please do. As it is written in the ancient text, Ethics of Our Fathers, the Mishnah, B'machon she'ein anashim hishtadel layot ish, in a place where good people are needed, be one. Thank you.
Glen Bronstein, give me a hug. Wait, Glen, get back here. Give me a hug, man. Hug it out. Glen Bronstein, join us at JINLAW, and we've got noshes and snacks in the back. Thank you very much. Thank you, Judge. Thank you, everybody, for coming. We've got an hour of drinks and snacks as per Rich Lenkov. Thank you.